there, I'm Watchin, founder and CEO of I Choose the Ladder, and I want to welcome you to the C-Suite Cheat Code, a show where we pull the curtain back on the unwritten rules of corporate America and give out the cheat codes to reconstructing the corporate ladder. First item on our meeting agenda today is performance reviews in a remote work environment. Then we make a quick stop onto Instagram, and then we head on over to Dewey Square Group for a conversation with Principal Minyon about overcoming fear and being present in your career. And then before we end our meeting, we will head on over to the hot seat where I will answer your questions. Today we will be talking about getting the attention of recruiters and fighting for your seat at the table. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's get to it. So in case you missed it, there was a Harvard Business Review article that came out, and they talked about how do we approach performance reviews in this new remote work environment. So first things, let's just first acknowledge that we have been working in some very, very strange times, and everyone has been trying to adapt to change. And I know we say that they are unprecedented times. After about 2 years of them being unprecedented, I really need some precedented times, but we are still unfortunately faced with figuring out how do we still connect and give impactful feedback when we haven't been physically together in almost 2 years. And so the article gives some suggestions around how you can do that in a way that is still gracious, it's still effective, and it still gives your team an opportunity to perform and grow in their roles. And so first thing that they recommend, and that I would also recommend, is that you address the elephant in the room. Let's have clear and honest conversations around how strange it's been to be remote fully for the last 2 years and not understanding when and where things would get back to some form of normality, right? That's very awkward. As a manager, you've been dealing with the changes, and your employees have been dealing with the changes. So approach it head on. You also want to make sure that you have some flexibility and compassion, right? We don't all have the same work and life environments. And so what may be easy or an easy transition for one employee may not be the same for somebody else who may be a caretaker or a parent or dealing with some, mental health issues, that the isolation of being by yourself in times where there's a global pandemic and a lot of other traumatic things going on. They may process information a little bit differently. And so you need to have, as a manager, even though you are giving feedback that can be tough, you need to make sure that it is clothed in compassion and that you are flexible in how you are talking to and engaging with your employees. The next thing is and I'm going to take a moment before I say this because it boils my blood. What you should not be doing is going into your reviews with the attitude that employees should be grateful to still have a job, right? I know that's a feeling. I know a ton of people have lost their jobs, but the flip side of that is the employees who stayed, the employees who are still employed, picked up the slack and the workload for a lot of those positions that were not replaced and those headcounts that still have not been filled. And so yes, while it's amazing that they still have jobs, you need to acknowledge and recognize all of the hard work and dedication that those employees have given to both your department and your company. And so the approach for a remote conversations when it comes to performance should be one of appreciation, of gratitude, of collaboration, of understanding, of a sense of I see you and I value you, right? Because again, you haven't physically been with them, but you know that had it not been for them, operations would not have gone the way that they did. And so an attitude of gratitude is how you should be approaching it. And then I think the last part of it is to humanize the experience. Make sure that you are being very candid about the challenges that you may have had to overcome during this time as a way to create connection with the employees. I already mentioned one of the things that I think you should avoid, but some other things to avoid. So don't treat it like business as usual. Yes, it is still a performance review, but it's not performance review with the same level of data inputs that you would have had we been in the precedented times, had we been in the office and you've had an opportunity to engage with your employees in the ways that you used to prior to COVID becoming a part of our everyday lives. You want to make sure that you're not letting your old biases creep in, right? So your perception of the person pre-pandemic, now all of a sudden it's heightened. If they were not a great performer before, you don't look at the data of what they've actually done, but now you are expecting them not to be a huge contributor in this space. So make sure that you're checking your biases. And I think you want to make sure that you don't skip the why. Context is going to matter so much in these conversations that we're having now around performance reviews, where we're going, how the company is adapting to change, the things that you're thinking about, the pressures that the business is trying to figure out, right? And the big meaty challenges that you all are trying to overcome, but also how that employee fits into the overall big picture. Before we jump into the next section, I just want to say, like, performance reviews are stressful when we are in our normal standard times. And so there's heightened stress and anxiety for everyone involved. So for the people who are individual contributors who are getting feedback from your manager, understand that your manager is under some stress as well. And they're also trying to navigate managing and helping you manage your career, and they're also trying to manage their own, right? And their own career mobility and what their options are. And so please give each other grace. Understand that it's not business as usual. This is an opportunity to model compassionate leadership. And I hope for all of our sakes that we take advantage of this, because how we treat each other during this time is going to determine if our cultures are made stronger, if we actually break them and have to start over and lose people in the Great Resignation. So reviews are important, but make sure that you are approaching them differently in this season. Next up, we are going to my favorite place in the world, the internet. Okay, so when I saw this meme, I about died, because I remember a time in my career when I was also being rewarded for something. And the reward was like, this is what you think of me. So the meme says, corporate, we have a special reward for everyone as a thanks for increasing our revenue and profits this year, despite the challenging pandemic. And then the reward looks like a goldfish. A goldfish. And so as we think about how we recognize people, first, we should be recognizing our employees who have literally been the backbones of our organizations during this pandemic. But we should make sure that the rewards that we are giving them actually feel like rewards. And it may be different based on organizations and based on, what the budgets are, but make sure that if you are going to give somebody a reward, they know that it's a reward and you're not just checking the box. In today's cheat code, I had the pleasure of speaking with Minyon Moore, who is a principal at Dewey Square Group. Minyon is probably one of the most well-connected people I know, and for her full interview, feel free to check out the podcast. She's episode 54. But in this conversation, we talk about fear and being present in your career. And so if you are someone who is letting fear stop you, or you are someone who is thinking so far in the future that you cannot recognize the gifts that you have today, then this cheat code is specifically for you.
Minyon, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I know I have been stalking you since NBA All-Star Weekend. And then I was watching TV and I saw you on the Boss documentary, and it seems like everywhere I look, you are contributing to Black excellence. So thank you for being here.
Sure. I am delighted to be with you. You're the boss.
But so you had the most fascinating career of anybody I've interviewed on this podcast. So you talk about Rainbow. How did you end up at the White House, Lord Jesus? Like, not this current White House. You worked in the White House back in the day, but how did you make that transition from doing nonprofit work to then into like full-on government and politics?
Well, I actually, when I went to the Rainbow Coalition, was actually Operation Push at the time. Reverend Jackson was running for president, and he ran in 1988, and I served as his deputy field director. Now, how I got that job, I have no idea. I mean, it wasn't like it was in my background, but we always prided ourselves in having a rich message and a poor campaign, so you got to do almost anything. And you learn, I mean, when you don't get put in a box, that is almost the best job you want to have, is to never get put in a box, because you get to kind of color outside the lines. And that's what I was able to do, color outside the lines. So I eventually, when I moved to Washington, I eventually went and worked for the Democratic National Committee, and I served as their political director. And then one fateful day, I got a call from the chief of staff saying, hey, listen, everybody thinks you'll be great over here at the White House. We'd love for you to come. And my answer, quite frankly, and audience, I tell you, I caution you, do not take this advice, but I must tell you the truth. I said, no, I do not want to come.
Why?
And so he says, well, why not? I said, well, I love the DNC. I'm having a great time. I'm learning so much. And I'm like saying to myself, this is the stupidest girl I have ever heard in my life. I'm talking to myself as I'm saying, you're turning down the White House for the DNC, but that's okay, I did. So he called back again, And I said, listen, Erskine, let me think about it. I think I want to come, but I'm not really sure. But let me think about it. Well, the third call I got, and this is the sequence, was from the Vice President of the United States. And so by that time, I was like, oh, sir, this is so great that you call me. I'm so happy to hear from you. And okay, let me think about it. So by this time, yeah, I never
you told the Vice President of the country you would think about it?
Yes, I did. And let me tell you, that's why I preceded this call with don't ever take this advice, because I will get to the end of the story. I feel it's very important for your readers and listeners to hear it, because I knew what was happening to me. And I've only come to admit it, like years later, I came to admit what was happening. So then Erskine called back. So then I made up the excuse I didn't want to take a salary cut. And if you're African American, your first time making money, think you're making money, and you're taking care of your family, most of us do, and and not even taking care of your family as much as you're just doing a lot of different things. I just bought a home, and I'm like saying, now do I really want to? Because he said you'd have to take a pay cut. So my retort was, well, why do I have to take a pay cut? I didn't ask to come here. You guys are asking me to come there. So I'm like, okay.
Wait, to the White House you're
huh?
To the White House you're thinking?
Yeah, I told the chief of staff, I'm like, but I didn't ask to come. You all, that. But see, that was the boldness of coming from the outside and having been, girded up and, you are somebodyism. I was taking it to the last degree. But here's the moral to the story. I went to the White House. I got past all of my foolishness, but it was fear. It was nothing but fear, because I did not think I was good enough. And I used every excuse in the book from, I don't want to take a pay cut, knowing that there is not many people in this world that get the chance to work at a White House. It's very few of us. And I had the audacity to say, oh, I'll think about it. But when I came to my senses, I realized that it was simply fear. And out of that,
what were you afraid of? What was the biggest fear?
It's the White House, and you got, your white counterparts, and they, many of them had already been there because it was 2 years in. So many of them had already been there, and you're like, okay, what do I know about working at a White House? Because, it's like this big edifice, and it's, it's like this spooky thing. And I'm saying to myself, come on, you can do this. You can do this. And Jesus, here's what I have to tell you. Don't ever make yourself feel like you're not good enough, because 9 times out of 10, it is floating in your head. And when you get to these places and then you sit and look around and you start listening to some of these people talk, and you like, what the heck did you fear? And from that point on, I have never, ever doubted myself. I'm not arrogant. I'm not, I'm a very humble person in many regards. And I think it was a lot of humility too that just told me, okay, you cool where you are. But the fact is, the one thing we must, and this for any woman, we must continue to say to ourselves, I am okay. I am enough. I am better than many people. And don't ever play yourself down. That's why I always work very hard. Because when you work hard, play by the rules, then you should never doubt yourself. But I did, but I learned from it.
So you have in your career managed a ton of different people from different backgrounds. Right now, we are working in some very strange, never been seen before times. So, and a lot of the questions that we get from Black women is like, well, it was already hard enough to prove my value when I was in the office, right? In terms of getting FaceTime with people. Now that we're not in the office, I don't know how I can provide value to my manager, to my team. So for you, how do you look at your team providing value to you as a leader right now?
Well, and I'll be the first to admit, when we first started transitioning to working home, it was very difficult for me. It wasn't difficult for my team. It was difficult for me. I was a very traditional, I like to go to work. I like to, I worked late. I was usually the last one to leave the office, but it was that sense of structure and comfort. It took me a while to transition into, okay, getting up, it wasn't the get up part, but it was just sitting at a table, not really having anybody to interact with. So even transmitting a comfort level for them was, I had to make a flip in my head because they had no problems. They had no problems not being in the office because most of them like to telecommute anyway. They wanted to. But I think one of the things that I noticed, there are those who show up on their Zooms and they show their face. And there are those who show up and you never see their face. In this extraordinary time, the people that are surging are the people that are showing their presence. There are some observations that I have noticed. If you're not a writer, I would say learn to write, because many of you are in these jobs as a first-time executive or manager. You didn't have anybody to teach you the ropes. So first thing you do is learn to write. Always make sure you can put stuff in writing, because people like to see that you have good follow through. And the best thing you can do to protect yourself is to follow through in writing. That's the first thing I have observed, which is really different. The second thing is sometimes we don't go out of our way to get in good trouble or to get in the way. And you have to make yourself present by getting in the way. And even if you,
what does that look like?
On Zoom, it probably looks like you're going to speak up. Instead of just being on a call, you have something to say. You have something to contribute. I mean, if you're being paid, it doesn't really, sometimes I get the most joy of listening to younger staff people talk, because you know what that says to me is they're growing courage as they learn to speak up. And you don't have to worry about being right or wrong, because you can always preface your statement by saying, I'm not really sure if this makes sense, but I'd like to just throw this out there. And 9 times out of 10, it's probably an idea that nobody even thought about. And it's a great idea. So I think one part of it just means your presence has to be connected to your courage, because a lot of times you'll get in these positions and you won't say a word. You just keep your head down and you won't say anything. So, if you're an executive in an office or middle management, it's really okay to speak up. The other thing I would suggest is that you get to know people who work with you, because they also see you when you don't see yourself. They will see you. I will tell you, most of my advance has come from people that saw me that I didn't know saw me. And they would give my name to somebody, or somebody would give me a call saying, hey, listen, have you talked to Minyon about this? Or most of my clients they come from people that know me. Your reputation matters.
And on that note, thank you.
Thank you, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
In today's hot seat, our employee question: how do I figure out if there's room in the budget for my raise? Who do I ask? I want to ask for one, but I don't want to ask for too much. Help! Okay, so here's the thing. You cannot ask someone if there's room in the budget for your raise. That would not be the best question. You should be focused on when your promotion cycles are and what competencies you need to display in order to be able to advocate for your raise, right? So focus on the timing. So when are raises typically given, to make sure that you don't miss that cycle? And 2, what do you need to be able to display in order to be an absolute yes when your name comes up for consideration for a raise? So don't ask if there's room in the budget. They will find it for you, or they will make it happen in the cycle. Sometimes there are off-cycle promotions and raises. And so you just want to make sure that you're clear on, first, when are raises given out? And second, what competencies you need to display in order to be able to advocate for more money. And in our manager hot seat question, it says, it feels like my team members expect transparency from me, but don't give me the same courtesy. I'm usually brought in when there's a fire drill, but it could have all been avoided had I been told sooner. How do I get them to be more forthcoming with information without becoming a micromanager? This is a really good question. And I think that one of the things that matters when we are talking about teams and leadership is that we are modeling the behaviors that we want to see, right? And so if you are someone who wants your team to be more transparent, you also have to be transparent with them even more so that they understand that it is okay and that they can feel comfortable sharing, right, when something maybe is not going right. You also need to question if you've created an environment where people feel like they can make mistakes without having the consequences be so dire that they are afraid to make mistakes, right? So what kind of culture have you all cultivated, and what message does that culture send to your employees? The last thing I will say is you also have to be okay with sharing vulnerably the things and the missteps that you may have, right? So that they know that you have made mistakes, you have recovered. There have been things that have not necessarily gone well. There have been client challenges. There have been all kinds of issues that you've managed through, and you still have a job and you're still well respected within the organization, so that they know that if those things do happen, right, they can proactively get in front of it without consequences that end up blacklisting them, that end up to getting them taken off projects or not given opportunities. Ultimately, fear is what stops people from sharing. And so look at the environment that you've created or that you all are creating together to make sure that it feels like a safe space where employees can share and be held accountable, but be held accountable in a way that doesn't necessarily cripple them or derail their careers. All right, y'all, it's almost time to go, but you know that I love to end each episode with an affirmation to get you through the week, to get you thinking about. And so let's see what the message for today is. Obviously, I'm using the I Choose a Ladder affirmation card. So if you don't have yours, head on over to choosealadder.com and pick up a set of the cards. But today's message is, I am doing my best to succeed, and that is enough. I am doing my best to succeed, and that is enough. As always, y'all, if you want to keep the conversation going about today's episode, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at ICUWatching. And until next time, thank you for watching. Meeting adjourned.